Good morning. Okay. I'll just wait another moment because it's Azah. Hemshech Advarim, you can't miss a piece in the beginning.
Good morning. No worries.
Morning.
Good morning, Sika. Okay, vamos nos. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Lamed Vav. We began a sugya on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. The Mishnah gave various cases where a person put an eruv before the correct time. Person placed the eruv Friday before Bein Hashmashos. At a certain point, something happened that invalidated the eruv. For example, a person placed an eruv made out of food that's truma, and now that it's already in Shabbos, we know the truma is tamei. Truma, tameya, is not valid to be used for an eruv. There is a suffix as to when did that happen. So on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, we're just going to quote Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi to make it clear. The Mishnah quoted other Tanoim. We are quoting Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi is because we have a contradiction from Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi from a mikvah in mikvahs. So we're quoting their shittas. Rav Meir in our Mishnah was machmer. The beautiful expression of chamor gamol, as we explained yesterday. Machmer doesn't mean that for sure the eruv is not good. There's a leniency to that. Machmer means that either if where I am physically is where I was koinish shvisa, then I cannot go, let's say, towards the east beyond 2,000 amas. I placed my eruv to the east. If my eruv went into effect, then I can go 2,000 amas even further east. We don't say that because maybe the eruv was not an eruv. Machmer also means is that we say that maybe the eruv that I placed to the east was effective. That limits my walk to the west of my food eruv to 2,000 amas. And basically, I'm going to be bound, I'm going to be stuck in between my current location and my eruv. That's Pshat Machmer. Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah and other Tanoim were Mekel. So that's the number one. On Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, we brought a mikveh in mikvahs. There a person went to the mikveh. There are various scenarios, all surmount to the same nakuda that there is a suffix whether the immersion was valid or not. And by mikvahs, Rav Meir is the one that says that if there is a tumah d'oraisa, then we have to be machmer. If the tumah is only midrabanan, so Rav Meir says we can be lenient. We can be lenient. And the Gemara said right away, hold on. If by a derabanan we're lenient, why was Rav Meir machmer in the Mishnah? The Gemara says that is easy to resolve. Rav Meir holds like his Rebbe. Rav Meir holds like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Meir holds that the need, the concept of a tchum, the isur of walking beyond the tchum is an isur de'oiraisa, tchum and de'oiraisa, so actually it fits together with Rav Meir mikvahs. Now, don't forget, Chevra, that Mishnah wasn't only a problem at Rav Meir, that Mishnah was a problem that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi holds that you can be lenient, suffocate of his kosher. In mikvahs, Rabbi Yossi is always machmer. Rabbi Yossi holds that the person always remains tamei, so that's a problem that we will have to deal with on Daf Lamed Vav. But let me just go through the flow. There was one other Mishnah that we had from Taharis. There was a person that for sure was near, Reuven was near Shimon. At a certain point, Shimon died. Reuven knows that he touched Shimon. He doesn't know, it's called Safek Naga. He doesn't know when he touched him. Over there, the Mishnah said that Rav Meir holds, Rav Meir Chachamim, that Safek Naga Toher. Here we got a problem again. Tuma is Doiraisa, Tumas Meis. Safek Rav Meir is lenient. So why is it that by Mekvois, when there was a Safek Doiraisa, if it's a Tuma Doiraisa, Rav Meir was Machmer? So here is where we began to introduce this Gavaldike concept of Chazaka. And there's a Chazaka called Chazaka de Me'ikara. How were things before the Safek came about? In the case of mikvahs, why did you take an item to the mikvah? Or why did the person go to the mikvah? Because the person was tamei. So you begin with tuma. Now you have a doubt whether the mikvah still had 40 sa or whether the mikvah lost its 40 sa. So we have a suffix. So we say that the chazaka, the me'ikara, resolves the doubt. And we say it remained as it was by the chazaka. Suffix naga is the same klal. The person, Reuven, when he went to sleep, was tahar. What's the problem? That he touched Shimon. Maybe when he touched Shimon, Shimon already was not living. Shimon had a din of a mace. Okay, you have a suffix. So say the cheskas, the me'ikara, that Reuven began in a status of tahara, that continues and it resolves the doubt. And my friends, this also really explains our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is that before Shabbos came in, you placed an eruv. You placed it, but I'm sorry, over here, you're not allowed to walk. There's a din. The chazaka de meikara, let's say in the Mishnah we can word it so many different ways, that the eruv was kosher, Now you have a suffix. So here we have a problem that we have to explain that we didn't speak out yet. Why is it that in our Mishnah, we don't take into account the chazaka de meikara that you placed the eruv? That was the last thing we had in the Gemara. That's important. Why do we say chaskas de mikara that you placed the eruv, that the eruv was good? So we left off the answer in Daf Lamed Hamid Beis was because since in our Mishnah all of the case of Safek was that you had two full kittim of Edim. That means you had two witnesses testifying. Let's say in the case of Truma, that we saw that the Truma became Tameh before Bein Hashmashos. You have another two witnesses that said, no, we saw the same act, we saw the same event, but we know that it happened later at night. It's called Shnei Edem HaMakchishim Zeh Zeh. And Rav Meir understands that the way this works is that when you have two groups of Edem, ultimately you remain with your doubt. But the pshat of remaining with your doubt is not that they cancel each other out. You have two bona fide groups of Edem. Whenever there are Edom involved, Chazaka is inconsequential. Chazaka can never go against Edom, even though there are Edom on this side and there are Edom on that side. Doesn't matter. But the lumdis, the tool of Chazaka, the Meikara, cannot be used in our Mishnah. This was Gavaldik where we left off. We have to close one more loose end to finalize explaining Shitas Rav Meir. And now on the Flamed Vav, we're going to have to resolve the contradiction that Rabbi Yossi, which is that Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah says that if you have a Safek Eruv, the Eruv is kosher. Whether Rabbi Yossi holds that Tchumen Deraisa Darabanan, you'll see the problem will remain because Rabbi Yossi in Mikvoi says that even when you have a Safek Midrabanan, not like Rav Meir that differentiated, Rabbi Yossi is always Metame. So if Rabbi Yossi is Metame, even by a derabanan, that means he's machmer. How can Rabbi Yossi be lenient by Eruvin? That's the stira that we're going to have on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. 3 answers that will solve it. We're going to have also very interesting cases where a person placed an Eruv, and we know for sure that the status of the Eruv changed. The only question is, again, did it change before it went into effect or after it went into effect? We have a couple of inquiries. And on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Beis, we're going to begin one of the main sugyas in Shas known as Bereira. Chanishkem Bereira. Just the word Bereira in Mishnayos and Gemara means retroactive clarification. Retroactive lemafreya clarification means, I'll just in the intro to give the case, a person can never place two Eruvin on the same Shabbos in opposite directions. A person only has the 2,000 amas from his Makim HaShvisa. The only question is, from where do I start counting? From where I'm physically at when Shabbos comes in, or from where my Eruv is at? What happens if a person puts an Eruv to the east of the city, and at the same Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, he puts an Eruv to the west of the city? One example will be is that he knows that there's a tax collector coming. He doesn't want for the tax collector to even see him. He doesn't know whether the tax collector is coming from the east or from the west. He wants to be able to run away not 2,000 amos, which he could without an Eruv. He wants to be able to run away 4,000 amos or almost 4,000 amos. So he says to himself, I'm going to place 2 Eruvin. And during Shabbos, if the tax collector comes, well, if he'll come from the east, then I'm going to rely on the Eruv that I placed to the west. If he'll come from the west, then I'll rely on the one I placed from the east. Are you allowed to do that? So that really depends whether we subscribe to Bereira. Bereira means retroactive clarification. Bereira means if you say Yesh Bereira, that even though while I placed these 2 Eruvin, I had no idea which one will be effective and which one I'm going to ignore, when on Shabbos I decide that the circumstances are such that I want to use the one to the west, and I'm saying, oh, that's my Eruv, we say, don't forget, Eruv has to be into effect Ben Hashmashas. No problem. That Lemafreya, retroactively, now it became barur that that was the one that I'm going to rely on. So if you subscribe to Bereira, then you could place a double Eruv with Gavaldic details that will begin today, and God will continue on tomorrow. Okay, guys, we left off on the top of Daf Lamed Vav. So we already explained in the intro the concept of Chazaka de Meikara. Rav Meir subscribes to Chazaka Meikara. That takes away the stira of the Mishnah in Mikvois, where the Rav Meir is Machmer by Yatuma Do'iraisa. By Safik Naga, Rav Meir is Mekel, because in both cases the Chazaka de Meikara was different. Our Mishnah, Eruvin is not Shayach, because since there was Shnei Kitei Edim does not allow you to use Chazaka de Meikara. Rava Amar, to resolve the stira between the Mishnah in Mikvois, where Rav Meir says that if the Tumah was the Oiraisa, you have a Safek, you're tummy. The Mishnah in Paris, where Rav Meir, not the Chachamim, Rav Meir says, Safek Naga, we say you're tar. Rava says, today, Hassan over there, meaning in Paris, in Safek Naga, you have 2 Chazakas Lekulam. 2 versus 1. What are the 2 Chazakas? Number 1, what's the question? Again, Reuven is laying near Shimon, and Reuven knows that he touched Shimon. In the morning, Shimon is not living. So the question is, when did Shimon pass away? If he touched him after he passed away, then Reuven is tummy. Number 1, Shimon went to sleep alive. So Shimon's Chazaka de Meikara is that he passed away the latest possible. He for sure is not living now. The question is, when did that happen? So you extend the Chazaka of being alive to later, which means that maybe when he touched him, based on the Chazaka de Meikara, Shimon was still alive. Then there's a second Chazaka. What's the second Chazaka? Reuven went to sleep in a state of Tara. You want to say that Reuven now is Tamei, Tumas Meis. So since you have 2 Chazakas de Meikara that are leaning on the side that Reuven is still tar, that's why Rav Meir says that he's tar. But over here, and we're not even going to go into Tuma now. We're going to go now into Eruvin. Over here by Eruvin, Rav Meir is Machmer, because there's only one Chazaka Lekula. What's the one Chazaka? We want to know, there's no Tuma by the person. What's Eruvin? The Eruv that was placed became Tameh. The Eruv began tar, and at a certain point, it became Tameh. So what are we going to say? We're going to say that because of the Chazaka, the Me'ikara, that it was tar, that it stayed tar longer, it only became Tameh after Ben Hashmashis, and therefore the Eruv is effective. You only have one Chazaka, the Chazaka of the Eruv itself. You don't have a double Chazkas Me'ikara. Since there isn't a double Chazaka Me'ikara, so you don't have to say the Shnei Kitei Edim, which is a doichik. That's why Rav Meir in our Mishnah, without a double Chazaka de Meikara, Rav Meir is going to be Machmer, especially, let's still continue with our theme, that Rav Meir holds Tchumen is the Oiraisa. So the Bechal, all of the Sfekas in the Mishnah is a Safik de Oiraisa, which normally you have to be Machmer. Yavaldik. Baruch atah Adino Yeleinu Olachayim, Shahak Olam Edvai. Okay. And by the way, that also explains mikvois, because whenever you don't have a double chazaka, de meikara, you can't use it. By mikvois, it's only one chazaka. The thing was tummy, it's even worse, but we don't care. There's a suffix. Rav Meir holds suffix deraisa. You're machmer, suffix derabanan, you make. Good. And now,
Rabbi, would Rav Meir always need 2 chazakas to because it seems like he needs 2, not 1, correct?
He needs 2 chazakas to be lenient. He doesn't need 2 to be machmer. In our Mishnah, In other words, to be lenient by a suffix deraisa l'chumra. If you have two chazakas de mikara, and the great example is suffix naga. It's a great example. The person was alive, which halachically, if you go cheskas mikara, he died later, not sooner. The living person began tahar. So if you have a doubt, let's say that he remained tahar. That's when you say, even by deraisa, that you're lenient. Now, Rabbi Yossi, the kasha that Rabbi Yossi is that in our Mishnah, whether Rabbi Yossi holds ERUVIN deraisa or the Rabbanan is completely inconsequential. Rabbi Yossi says that in the cases of suffix, you are lenient. The eruv is an eruv. In the Mishnah Mikvais, which is the Aflam and Hamad Beis on top, the suffix naga Rabbi Yossi doesn't opine. It's the Meir and the Chachamim. But in the Mikvais, Rabbi Yossi holds whether the Tumah is deraisa, it's called Tumah Chamura, or whether it's Tumah Kala, which is the Rabbanan, even by Tumah Kala, Rabbi Yossi says Mitame. Rabbi Yossi says there's a suffix, you got to be Machmer. So why was he lenient here by ERUVIN? That's the kasha in the Gemara. And again, like we mentioned, there's going to be three answers. So Amar Rav Huna bar Chinanon, Shani Tuma, in the mikveh mikvahs. Yes, Rabbi Yossi holds Tchumen is midrabanan. Tuma is deraisa. But hold on. Rabbi Yossi said clearly that the item or the person remains tamei even if it's a Tuma midrabanan. Doesn't matter. Hoil v'yeshla iker min ha'toyim. All of the Tumah D'Rabbanans are rooted in Tumah D'Oraisas. And like Rashi says, if a person will witness that someone who went into the mikveh, and I know that now there's a doubt whether the mikveh was good. If I'm going to hear that they paskin, that that person became tahar, that the mikveh was effective, I'm not going to know that the only reason why they said it was effective was because the Tumah was only D'Rabbanan. He was I won't know that. I'm going to think, no, that you can be lenient and you can paskin l'kul, and I will apply that even when there's a Tumah D'Oraisa. It's very easy to confuse a Tumah D'Oraisa and Tumah D'Rabbanan. You don't see a difference. Masha Enken by Tchumen, Shabbos Nami D'Oraisa, and that was Shitas Rav Meir. So the Gemara says, therefore, this answer must be that Rabbi Yossi holds, not like Rav Meir, that Tchumen D'Rabbanan. Now, guys, let's remember something. Almost everyone holds, and that's a clear Yerushalmi, that the tchum of Yud Beis Mil is the D'Oraisa. Doesn't matter. Yud Beis Mil and 2 mil, which is where we place the eruv, is such a large difference. No one will confuse one with the other at all. See, Tumah D'Rabbanan, you don't even see the Tumah. You don't know whether it's D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan. When it comes to the having to place an eruv by 2,000 amas, not 2 mil, 2,000 amas versus 12 mil, that's 24 times larger. No one will confuse one case to the other. The current eruv is complete D'Rabbanan. By a D'Rabbanan, you can be lenient. By Tumah, even by a Tumah D'Rabbanan, since you might confuse it with a Tumah D'Oraisa, Rabbi Yossi is mach. That's answer number one. V'id ba yisema, and this will be similar to what we learned yesterday, not directly but indirectly, that there's Rav Meir in his rabbi. We said Rabbi Yishmael, and what Rav Meir himself holds. And here, same thing with Rabbi Yossi. V'id ba yisema ha meaning in the Mishnah Mikva'is, where Rabbi Yossi says even by a Tumah Kala you're machmer. That is taka his own shita. However, in our Mishnah, that the eruv is kosher, that was only the shita of his Rebbe, but not his own. And Daikanami in our Mishnah, Diktani Rabbi Yossi says that Aftulmus Heid Mishum Chamisha Zakenim Shesafik eruv kosher. So you see, this is taka not his own shita. This comes from the 5 Zakenim. So Shema Mina, that we can say that even though Rabbi Yossi didn't say Amar Rabbi Yossi Mishum, but in the bin quoted in our Mishnah is not his own opinion. And the Rava Amar, this is a third answer to the statement of Rabbi Yossi, that Hasam Hainu Tamam, the Rabbi Yossi Ha'amei Tamei Al Cheskasoi, the Ema Loi Taval. Going back to the Chazaka Meikara, that when you have a suffix, right? That when you have a suffix on an item that went into a mikveh, Rabbi Yossi subscribes to one chazaka de meikara, and even by a Tumah D'Rabbanan, so what? You don't have a suffix, cheskas meikara. However, over here, now here it's important to read Rashi, to find that Rashi, it begins on the height by me of the end of the Bach. Avo masnisin, iker chazaka lekula ulechumra. we have to speak this out. How would you apply chazaka de meikara? I know we keep on saying that the eruv was good. Yeah, the chazaka de meikara of the eruv was good, but there was a chazaka de meikara that's going in the opposite direction. Why is that? Hamed adam al cheskas tchum beisoy. Without relying on the food eruv, you are in your house. That's also going to be considered the chazaka de meikara. And therefore, since the food eruv has a doubt on it, the chazaka of where were you? You were in your house, count the eruv from your house. So since in our Mishnah, the chazaka de meikara is going in both directions, therefore what? Therefore, Rabbi Yossi is not machmer. When there's a chazaka de meikara that's going in one direction, which is in the case of Tumah and Mikvois, so we follow that chazaka. Here, we don't have such a chazaka in dual directions. So there's no chazaka de meikara. So what do? So let's go back to the concept. Since Rabbi Yossi subscribes that ERUVIN is the Rabbanan, Tchumen is the Rabbanan, the 2,000 amas, therefore, Safek the Rabbanan, you can be maker. Just like you're saying that there is a dual chazaka de meikara going in opposite directions here by ERUVIN, let's say the same thing. The item that went into the mikvah was tamei, emes, chazaka de meikara. But why do you say that the mikvah was kosher? So here also one should cancel each other out. And whenever you have a suffix derabanan, let Rabbi Yossi be lenient. So says the Gemara, now it must be, according to this third answer, that in the Mishnah mikvahs, the mikvah shaloi nimdad, the mikvah doesn't have a chazaka de meikara. It's an interesting concept. Now, guys, our mikvah will always have a chazaka de meikara. Our mikvah is not exactly 40 sa. But when you have a mikvah that to begin with is exactly, it's on the borderline of it being kosher. Now, I don't know what shaloi nimdad means. It doesn't mean that you never measure. It doesn't mean that. It means that you didn't measure it for a very long time. And therefore, the possibility for something that was exactly in the right share, for it to be diminished, is very easy. That is, then you don't have a chazaka de meikara. You can't say the mikvah, if you would have measured it the day of, again, I don't know exactly how to apply this, the day of, the week of, there's a certain proximity where you say, Take, the last time we measured it, it was good. And we're going to have this in many other times, maybe even a month. But if it wasn't measured, let's say for a year, there's a certain time where we say it wasn't measured for a very long time. So the only chazaka meikara is that the item that went into the mikvah was tamei. So yes, when there's only one chazaka de meikara, Rabbi Yossi follows that even by a sofik derabanan. Tanya, more on Shittas Rabbi Yossi. We learned in the Braisa, Ketzar Amar Rabbi Yossi, sofik eruv kosher. So let's give the example that the Braisa gives. Eruv betruma. That's the fourth case in the Mishnah. And sofik mibad yoim nitmeis, sofik meshachashech nitmeis. That's the case where Rabbi Yossi says that you're good, that the eruv is valid. Like we are, okay. Like we explained, there's a chazaka both ways. The last explanation is that in our Mishnah there is no chazaka de meikara. One cancels the other one out. It's a sofik derabanan. The eruv is valid. The chein beperis, all right, that you put peris that were tevel, sofik mibad yoim niskanu. Now this is a problematic case because here the peris were placed when they were tevel. At some point you took off the trumas u'maisris, making it a valid item to use for an eruv, but you don't know when you did it. Sofik mibad niskanu sofik niskanu. Who safek eruv kosher, and the Gemara is going to ask in a moment why would we say in this case you're not even beginning with anything good? Well, at least in the Reisha, you began with truma that was tahira. Later it became tamei. That's a much better type of safek, all right? The latter case, especially according to the first answer in the Gemara, that Rabbi Yossi does rely on a cheskas to make kana, it should have been the opposite. We'll have to clarify that. Weiter down the Braisa. Aval Eida B'Truma, which from the beginning was Safik Torah, Safik Tameya, you never had a Chazaka. The thing that paid is that from the beginning, Safik Nisnu, Safik Leniskanu, Ain's a Safik Eruv Kasher. So clearly, this Braisa is backing up the approach that Rabbi Yossi does ascribe to a Cheskas Meikara. But now we have to understand the second case in the ratio of the Braisa. That we say ha me truma al cheskasei, and therefore ve'ema tahirihi. The first case of the Braisa if you're giving me in the second case that you put down Peris, that were Tevel, Peris Nami, Hame Tevel al Chaskosei, and in that case, Ve'ema loy niskenu. Answers the Gemara, loy tema, you have to amend the Braisa. The case there was not that Safik Miba Oyer Niskenu Ella. When you placed the food, it was rectified foods. It was non-Tevel food. At a certain point, Tevel fell back into it. When Tevel falls into fruit, produce that was already properly tithed, we call that mixture Dema, Demai. We don't know what it is. So here, since when you placed it, it was good, the Braisa is understanding Rabbi Yossi that you follow the Chazaka Meikar. And now, boy, Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak from Rav Huna, great case. You have 2 loaves of bread. One you know is tummy, which may not be used. We're speaking about the truma. One you know is tahira, which may be used. You know what you're doing? If you have these 2 breads, you cannot eat any of them. But you know for sure one is good. So the owner sends a shliach with both loaves of bread, and he tells them to place both. I don't know which one is tahira. Take both, put them into place. I'm going to be kind of shvisa there. Does it work or not? And the Gemara explains how this boya is both l'Rav Meir and l'Rav Yossi in our Mishnah and Daf Lamed. The boya l'Rav Meir, the boya l'Rav Yossi, the boya l'Rav Meir, Atkan l'Rav Meir Hassan, that when there's a suffix, the Eruv is not valid, because there, the leka tahira, which means in our Mishnah, there is no food that's definitely tahira. There's always a doubt. So for whatever reason, however we explain Rav Meir, he's going to be machmer. But over here, ha ika tahira, one is vadai tahira. So maybe even Rav Meir will be minded that the Eruv is valid. And likewise, the same boya can be asked on Rav Yossi. When did Rav Yossi say that a suffix is good, the Eruv is valid, Elo Hassan, the im isa bihi tahira yadala. In other words, if it would be tahira, you know which one is tahira. The case of the Mishnah is there's only one loaf. We have a suffix. But if it was tahira, that one loaf would have been tahira. But over here, you don't know which one is tahira. So couldn't you rely on that Eruv or not? So Amalei, the boy was asked from Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, Bein Rabbi Yossi ben Rav Meir. Since Be'inan Su'uda Haru'uya Mi Ba'oid Yoim, whatever you place for the Eruv has to be something that you are able to eat not from Friday late afternoon. Su'uda Haru'uya Mi Ba'oid Yoim. And since you always had a suffix, you had 2 pieces of bread, one to Haida, one to Truma, and therefore you may never eat any of them. So that's not Levadai L'Kula Alma. You're not going to have a leka, you're not going to have a kosher Eruv. Next boy. A person was magdish a kikar. Hegdish obviously may not be used for an Eruv. It's asur b'hanam me'ila b'hegdish. But you didn't say this is hegdish now. You said this is hegdish tomorrow. Tomorrow means for a yid. If you're Friday, tomorrow doesn't mean like by the goyim, of course. Tomorrow means on Shabbos. The question is, from when did you intend? What was your kavana that the hegdish should be chal? That was the question. Is it tomorrow Shabbos Vadai, or is it tomorrow from Bein Hashmashos? And as we keep on learning that as long as the Eruv is still Chayil Bein Hashmashos, it will be valid. So the question will be, what was your kavanah? So first he made a statement, L'machar Kodesh. Then he took that piece of bread, so the question is Mal. So Amar later, which Rav Nachman responds, Eruvay Eruv, that we say that L'machar meant Shabbos Vadai, didn't mean Bein Hashmashos, and therefore the Eruv is going to be valid. However, that is good if it begins Choil. And we have a doubt, when did it become Kodesh? And as we're learning, let's use a Chazaka de Me'ikara, we extend its status of Choil longer, and it resolves the doubt. So what happens now if it's going to be in the reverse? That if a person says, now Friday, the bread is Kodesh, the person already designates money that he's using for its redemption, and he's doing the redemption act, but he's saying that the redemption should only be Chal tomorrow. Ulamachal Chal. Again, Lamachar can mean Ben Hashmashos, when we practically are noyeg Shabbos because Ben Hashmashos, we don't know what Ben Hashmashos is, or does Lamachar mean Shabbos Vadai? And then he says, Erev Libazeh. And let's use the same Chazaka de Meikara. If it begins with Kodesh, then we extended Kodesh the longer. So Amalek, to be consistent, Ein Eruv Eruv. Ein Eruv Eruv. And Rabbi said, why? Mishnah. So Amalek, so Rav Nachman tells him, this is an expression that's used regularly, that Lechi Teichoil Alei Koira de Melech, when you will measure out for me a certain amount of salt, a koira is a large measurement of salt, when you do that for me, I'll explain it to you. This is just a gesture of saying, you want me to explain it to you? I want you to do something for me, but he explained it to him. Since again there's a suffix, this whole concept of cheskas de meikara, so loy nachso lei kedusha. So therefore we say that kedusha does not descend until the later moment because we extend the chazaka de meikara. Similarly, the same logic when it was hayoim kodesh lamachar chayil, again misfeka. If it begins with kodesh, we want to change the status again. We change it the later the better, the later possible, the latest possible. Misfeka leipaka lekedush asaminei. Okay. We learned in a Mishnah Tvul Yoim. Tvul Yoim are all these articles that are taken to the mikvah on their final day. So even though after the mikvah regarding, let's say, Meiser Sheni, they're not going to be Tamei nor Metame, but something that's a Tvul Yoim, even a Keli, as far as Truma is concerned, it's going to be Metame, the Truma until night. Until night. So now, says the Mishnah, if a person has login Tvul Yoim, if you have a pitcher, a Keli, that was already toiveled, it has the status of a Tvul Yoim. If Chulin is in there, nothing happens to the Chulin. But if Truma is in there, it's going to become Tomei. Now, there was a Levi. The Levi received Meiserishin. And as we just learned recently, the Levi also is mechuyev to separate from his Meiserishin, Trumas Meiser or Meiser Mina Meiser. And this person stuck this pitcher in the Meiser Tevel, and he's removing from it what will become Meiser Min HaMeiser. The moment Meiser Min HaMeiser would be Chal, if it's Chal, when it's in the pitcher before night, then it's going to right away become Tamei, which is something that no one wants to happen. And he says, Harei Zeh Trumas Meiser. He knows the halachas. Only lichsha tachshach. Only when it gets dark. So first of all, devar of kayam. It doesn't have to be chal at the moment that you physically separated it from the rest of the ma'aserishin. But now, v'im omar evo libazem. But now, if he says use this for my eruv, what did we just say? That what? What did we just say? That the trumas ma'aser is only chal at night. Before you separate Meiser min ha-Meiser from Meiserishin, we already learned this together. You may not use this Meiserishin for an Eruv because if the Levi, no one can consume it. It's still called Tevel because it wasn't properly fully tithed. So since the Chalois of the Meiser min ha-Meiser is only at night, so therefore, if he wants to use this for an Eruv, lo yomar klum. And clearly we see over here that when does the Eruv go into effect? So Omar Rava, L'chora, Zoi Soimeres from the Mishnah, that Soif Hayoim Koina Eruv. Soif Hayoim means at the end of Friday. Soif Hayoim means the last moment, even before Bein HaShmoshes. Because if you're going to say that Tchilas Hayoim Koina Eruv, that will be the other side, Tchilas Hayoim were to mean at the end of Bein HaShmoshes, at the beginning of Shabbos, if Tchilas Hayoim Koina Eruv, then this Eruv would be valid. Because Tchilas Hayoim, which is at the last moment of Bein HaShmoshes, is the moment when the status of Tful Yoim leaves the pitcher. That is when indeed it would have been Chal. Now you have bona fide Truma. The Truma is Tohaira. Truma Tohaira can be used for an Eruv. So this L'chayr is Aliyah, that the Eruv has to go into effect nach the last moment of Friday. Because the E, Salka Daita, Tchilas Hayoim, Koina Eruv, at the beginning of Shabbos, at the end of Bein HaShmoshes, so then im arveli eruv bozeh amaylo yomar klum. When Bein HaShmoshes ends, Tchilas Hayom of Shabbos is exactly when the tomb of Tvul Yom leaves. And that is when the Meiser Min HaMeiser will be Chal. And it's going to remain to hide off. Again, it's a proof. It's a proof, says Rava, that Soif Hayoim Koine Eruv. So the Gemara right away counters, quoting the line we just learned on Amud Aleph, Amar Av Papa, it's not true. One can argue, Afilu Tema Tchilas Hayoim Koine Eruv. When does the Eruv acquire your Makim Shvisa? At the end of Bein HaShmoshes. Still, nevertheless, we can put these two dinim together. Even if you hold that the Eruv is kind of shvisa at the beginning of Shabbos, but whatever you place for an Eruv, l'chol hadeyas, has to be something that you can derive benefit from, that you can eat in the beginning of Bein HaShmoshes, or a rega before Bein HaShmoshes, and that makes so much sense. Because the concept of an Eruv is that you are kind of your place of Shvisa, normally where you are, or if you have food placed somewhere where your food is. You have to not only be near your food, there has to be the potential for you to eat your food. When is it that you need to be able to eat your food? Not in the beginning of Shabbos, at the end of Friday. At the end of Friday, even if you say that it goes into effect in the beginning of Shabbos, but you have to be able to consume that at the end of the prior day, for you to say that since you had your food that you were able to consume then, that is what brought you there then, and it only goes into effect. Tchilas Hayoim, very interesting. And therefore you can't prove anything from that Mishnah, and therefore we remain with this machlokes, which we cannot resolve it from a Stam Mishnah, where the Tchilas Hayoim kind of, or whether Sefer Yom Kaina, and everyone holds the Inan Su'uda Haroim Eboyeh. Okay. Chavre, we're starting the Sugya of Bereira. Here again, it looks like that the words are relatively few, but the content is really kind of awesome. This perhaps is the most important Sugya in Shas of Bereira, even though we have this in other places as well. Okay, says the Mishnah. Masna Adam Aliruva. Like we mentioned, and you cannot place two Eruvs in a way that they are both effective. You can only take in Shabbos in one location. From that one location, you have in each direction 2,000 amos. Either that one location is where you physically are, or that one location is where your Eruv is. So placing an Eruv to the Mizrach of your city and to the Ma'ariv really can never mean that they both are in effect. But a person is allowed to place two separate Eruvim, each one having their own tchum, and he can stipulate by saying, and the Mishnah gives two examples. One example is a person who wants to be in the opposite direction of his Eruv, and one mashal is where a person wants to go in the direction of his Eruv. Which means, first case is that there's a tax collector whom you want to run away from, even without an Eruv. If the tax collector comes to town, first of all, the whole town is Dalad Amas, halachically. And then you can go to any direction, 2,000 Amas. You are afraid that the tax collector knows the dinim of Tchum Shabbos. He's going to find you. The only way you're going to successfully hide from him is if you're going to walk almost 4,000 Amas away from the city. Now you can do that by placing if he's coming min HaMizrach, and you place the Eruv Ma'ariv, you place the Eruv 1999 Amos away from the city. So first of all, you can walk there, and because even if you took him Shabbos by the Eruv, you're within the 2,000 Amos. Then you can walk to the other, right to the west, another 2,000 Amos. That is what you need. So, and you're saying, you have to say that if the Goyim are coming min HaMizrach, then I will rely on the one that I put in Ma'ariv. If the tax collector is coming from Ma'ariv, which means to run away, I have to go to the Mizrach, then I'm going to decide on Shabbos retroactively that it will be the Mizrach. Then he makes another stipulation. What happens if you have two tax collectors? Each one will come from another side. I'm allowing myself to decide on Shabbos which one is the bigger monster. Which one do I want to, it's bad and bad. It's Cham or Gamol, but still, furthermore, it's not only he's giving himself two options, there's a third option. You know what the third option is? Not to rely on any food Eruv, and therefore to be kindness Makim Shvisa, Begashmis in the city. He's saying that also. And if no one will come, if I don't want to rely on any Eruv, So then Hareini Kibnei Iri, which all my Bnei Iri, most people didn't put an Eruv, and I measure my 2,000 amas from where I physically am, or from the boundaries of the city. A person is allowed to make such a stipulation. It's only effective because we subscribe to the tool of Breira, of retroactive clarification. So at any time in Shabbos, if I decide to use the Eruv on the Mizrach, that is Pshat, that the Mafreya, that was already my Makam Shvisa, even though at the time I had no idea where my Makam Shvisa is, the Eruv is effective. Likewise, another case, here the case is the opposite, that a person lives in a city, and there is another village to the east, not within 2,000 amas, that would be great, but it's 3,000 amas away. There's another village to the west, also 3,000 amas away, or 4,000 amas away. It's far away. And there is a chacham that's coming to give a drasha, and I don't know whether he's coming to the east or to the west. I don't know yet. And how are you gonna find out? That's a kasha. Who's gonna notify you? But you're gonna find out on Shabbos. So here again, you're placing an Eruv to the east or Eruv to the west, and you're saying that if I'll find out that the chacham came to the east, then I'm using the one to the east. Im chacham min hamizrach, Eruv el hamizrach. Min hamaydev, if the chacham I'm gonna discover is coming min hamaydev, Eruv el hamaydev. What happened? And he's giving all the options. Maybe there are going to be two different chachamim, two different lectures. And I want to give myself the option of choosing on Shabbos to which darshan I want to go listen to. Or I'm giving myself another option. It could be that they were planning to go there. No one made the trip. There will be no chachamim. I don't want to be bound by any of them if I so choose. Hareini, Kibnei Iri, these are the two cases where the Mishnah paskins that you could subscribe to Bereira when it comes to an Eruv. Comes along the Tana Rebbe Yehuda, and he is arguing with the Chachamim in the case of a Chacham. The meaning of a Chacham means if also your teacher, then you're obligated to go to your rabbi. So if you place two Eruvim, and what are you saying? That if Chachamim come to Mizrach and to Ma'ariv, I get to choose. Rabbi Yehuda holds that if one of these two Chachamim is your teacher, then Halacha says you want to go here to your teacher. However, only if they're both equally your teachers, then still Rabbi Yehuda is subscribing to Bereira, and therefore L'Makoim Sheyirtza Yeilach. Now, before we get into the lumdus of Bereira, the Mishnah gave two examples, and in the example, the Nachri was the one from whom you want to run away from, and the Chacham is the one to whom you want to run to. The problem is that Kiyasa Rabbi Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael, and he brought with him a Braisa. And in the Braisa, the same din, but the same examples, but it was in the opposite direction. The case that the Braisa that Rabbi Yitzchak came with said that if you're saying that if the Nachri will come in a Mizrach, I want to go to the Mizrach. If the Goy is going, I'm going to find out is coming to the Ma'ariv, then I want to rely on the Ma'ariv side. Look, you're running towards the Nachri. If the Chacham, if you hear that your teacher is coming in a Mizrach, you want to run to the Ma'ariv. You want to run away as far as you could. So, the din is the same, but Kasha Nachna Nachim and Kasha Chacham Chacham. So the Gemara says, Nachrim Anachim Loi Kasha. Our Mishnah Ha Unzerem is Bifar Hagvina. It's speaking about the tax collector from whom you want to run away from. However, the Braisa that Rabbi Yitzchak came was the Mari Damasa. The Goy was a town official. A town official was the person to whom, if you have a complaint or something that has to be rectified, he's the person to talk to. That type of Nachri. Now, we know that Mefakhin B'Tzorchi Sibur B'Shabbos. So if the only opportunity you have is that the roads are there's potholes in the road, their well is not working, he's the guy that has the koyach to fix it, then yeah, you can go there Shabbos, but you're running to talk to him. Chacham like Kasha, our Mishnah b'Moisiv Pirkei is speaking about a Chacham that's teaching Mishnah, is teaching you Gemara. You want to listen to his drasha. The Braisa was b'Maknei Shema, the one who's teaching your children how to read the Shema. Some of the Rishonim say he's someone whom you owe tuition to. So a guy on Shabbos is coming to whom you owe tuition, you want to run away. It's kind of funny. But anyways, that's the mashal that the Braisa gives, but it's the same nakuda of Yesh Bereira. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, that im hoya echad mehem rabbi, then halacha determines that you want to listen to your rabbi. V'Rabbanan say, no, that zimnim denichale b'chavrei tzvei rabbi. No, sometimes you would rather, not only your teacher and another teacher, sometimes your chaver, you want to learn with your chaver, which is less knowledgeable, more than you want to learn with your teacher. So therefore, he completely argues every person has an individualized want, and the concept of Bereda will always allow you, the Eruv placer, the Meshaleach of the Eruv, to determine on Shabbos retroactively which Eruv, if any of them, will be valid. Now, guys, let's start. Amar Rav. Rav says that Leisa Lemasnissen. Leisa Lemasnissen is speaking about Rabbi Yehuda, that our version of what Rabbi Yehuda says cannot be in the Mishnah. I know that that's wrong. Why do I know that you gotta Leisa out? That Rabbi Yehuda, it's a wrong gear, so it's something that we rarely ever want to do, because Midatani Ayoy. Ayoy is the name of a Tana. Ayoy taught the Braisa, and based on the Tana of Ayoy, I know that there's a mistake in our Mishnah. Tani Ayoy, what's Ayoy's version of Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, listen to this. His version holds that Rabbi Yehuda holds Ein Adam Masnal Shnei Devarim Ki Echad. Ein Adam Masna. Guys, let's read 10 lines in Rashi. Under the Gemara, in the medium-sized lines of Rashi, a person can never stipulate. In other words, Loimer Balakanu Lakan Lamakam She'ertze Eleich. The Ayoy knows that the Rabbi Yehuda argues with Bereda, the Ein Bereda. Ela al echad ve'eino yoidei aleichin yavoi. However, this is the Havamina. I can never place two Eruvin and leave the determination to me. That is something that I may not do. So if a Chacham is coming both Lemizrach and to Ma'ariv, Rabbi Yehuda says you can't place such two Eruvin. However, there is one case that Ayoy is Maida, that Rabbi Yehuda holds you could place two Eruvin. That is where you are not the one making the decision. What case would that be? There's only one Chacham coming. You don't know which city he's coming to. So you're placing one Lemizrach and you're placing one to Ma'ariv. So whichever one he'll go to, that would automatically determine which Eruv you're going to be relying on. See, that means that you're not leaving the decision to your choice, you're leaving it to the Chacham's choice. That's something that Rabbi Yehuda is Maida to. But Ein Adam Masnal Shnei Devarim Ki Echad, it's in the case where two Chachamim are coming, you can't place two Eruvim. The only time where Rabbi Yehuda allows you to use these two Eruvim if there's only one teacher coming. And you're basically saying whichever place he's coming to, I'm going to go to. Says the Gemara, Elim Kain, Bachacham Lemizrach, Eruv Lemizrach, Bachacham Lemizrach. That is where Rabbi Yehuda is Maida, Abba Lakan or Lakan Loi. Counters the Gemara, and therefore in our Mishnah, it sounds like, right, Rabbi Yehuda says that these are words in our Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda. You got to erase that. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't ever allow you to choose when there are two Chachamim. You guys are chatting this? When does Rabbi Yehuda say you can place two Eruvim? When you're not making the choice. You don't know where the Chacham is coming. So you're placing two Eruvim, and you are saying, wherever he's coming, I will go. You already decide. You don't know Lemizrach or Lamaira. So when the Chacham comes Lemizrach, then you go to the one in the Mizrach. But the Gemara doesn't like that, because if you do not subscribe to Bereda, who cares who is the one making the decision? Who cares whether you're the decider or whether the Chacham is the decider? If before Shabbos came in, the Chacham is not Lemizrach nor Lamaidov, it's something that the Chacham is going to do on Shabbos. If we are accepting Ayoy's version of the Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't aim Bereda, then even if there's only one Chacham, if the Chacham wasn't already in a place before Shabbos came in, so it was open, and the Chacham is going to choose Mizrach Ma'ariv, then it should also not be effective. You should not be allowed to go not to Mizrach nor Ma'ariv, because Ein Bereda, when Shabbos came in, there was not clarity which Eruv was an Eruv. If there wasn't a Vadai Eruv when Shabbos came in, you know where Shabbos is from where you are physically. That's the Gemara's counter. This is on Ayoy in the Braisa. Well, you're telling me we're going to accept Ayah's version. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow you to choose Lakan or Lakan. Why? Why not? Because you cannot determine later, retroactively, the Ein B'Eira, and an Eidu has to be an Eidu when Shabbos comes in, at that point. So why are you saying Lemizrach or Lemaitiv? That if you're placing two, one in Mizrach and one in Maitiv, and you're saying, I'm not choosing, there's only one Chacham, I am choosing to listen to the Drash of the Chacham. If the Chacham didn't yet go before Ben Hashmash's already either Lemizrach or Lemaitiv, so then, even though it's going to be the Chacham's choice, but it's also going to be using B'Eira, Nami Ein B'Eira, so therefore, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, correct. Whenever the Eruv is placed, even if the Chacham is going to be the one choosing where to go, Ein B'Eira. The only time that Rabbi Yehuda will allow you to place two Eruvim was Ukvar Ba Chacham. The case will be that the Metzias is the Chacham already before Shabbos is either in the village to the east or in the village to the west. You don't know. That's not called B'Eira. Gavaldik. It's when the Chacham is already in the city to the east. I don't know about it. I'm concerned. The information that I have is narrowed down enough. He's either already in the Mizrach or he's already in the Maidav. Here, Rabbi Yehuda says you can put two Eruvin. And you can say, I am not going to make any choice on Shabbos. The choice was already made. The choice was made by the Chacham is already somewhere. I'm only going to find out. That's called a Gilui Milso Ba'alma. A Gilui Milso Ba'alma, when I found out during Shabbos that my teacher already came to the village Erev Shabbos to the Mizrach, that's not called B'Eira. And therefore, that's effective. So yes, you can put two Eruvim when you don't know, but you're not using B'Eira. The moment Erev Shabbos one comes in, it's taka not yet determined. That's Rav saying, quoting from Ayoy, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow us to use B'Eira, Ein B'Eira. And therefore, the Girsa in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda is not just arguing where it's a rabbi. And a lot of the words, the end of the Mishnah, the Im Hoyishtein Rabbi said, all of that, that's where we will leave off, God willing, to be continued. We're good? B'Eira. Very good. Baruch Hashem. Guys, these are very big sugyas, this. Retroactive clarification.